It was a bright Saturday morning in downtown Los Angeles. The streets were alive with the usual chaos, people rushing to coffee shops, joggers passing by, and cars honking impatiently at each other. Chuck Norris, dressed in a simple gray jacket, jeans, and sunglasses, was walking casually toward a local diner. He had no entourage, no fanfare, just a man enjoying a quiet morning. As Chuck passed a corner, a police officer sitting in his patrol car noticed him. The officer's eyes narrowed. To anyone else, Chuck looked like an ordinary man, but to the cop, he was suspicious. Without hesitation, the officer stepped out of his vehicle, his boots crunching on the pavement. "Hey, stop right there," the officer barked. Chuck stopped immediately, his calm demeanor unshaken. "Yes, officer?" Chuck asked, his voice steady and polite. The cop glared at him, his tone sharp. "We've had reports of theft in this area. Where are you going? What's in your bag?" Chuck smiled faintly, but didn't rise to the provocation. "I'm heading to the diner. Just breakfast." The officer stepped closer, his voice growing louder. "Don't lie to me. I need to search your bag." Bystanders began to notice the tension. Some paused mid-walk, others pulled out their phones. Chuck's calm presence contrasted sharply with the officer's aggression. He handed over his bag without complaint, maintaining eye contact, his body language relaxed but confident. The officer rifled through it, muttering accusations under his breath. Suspicious behavior, always lurking around. Chuck interrupted, still polite. "Officer, I haven't done anything wrong. I'm just a man trying to enjoy breakfast with no trouble." The officer snorted and waved the bystanders away, determined to make this confrontation public humiliation. But Chuck didn't react with anger. Instead, he stood quietly, like a lion being prodded, silent, calm, unshakable. Little did everyone know, this ordinary man was Chuck Norris, and what the officer did next would completely backfire. The officer's hands shook slightly as he rifled through Chuck's bag. Every item, the simple wallet, a pair of sunglasses, a notebook, was harmless, yet he muttered under his breath, "Something's off here. Always someone suspicious lurking around." His words, dripping with prejudice, were meant to intimidate. Chuck stayed calm. He didn't flinch, didn't raise his voice. His eyes met the officer's, steady and unyielding, a silent challenge that the cop could feel but not confront. "Officer," Chuck said calmly, "everything in my bag is mine. I haven't stolen anything. I don't understand why you're treating me this way." The officer's glare intensified. "We've had reports. Witnesses saw a man fitting your description acting strangely. You could be connected." He waved his hand, gesturing for the bystanders to step back. A few people hesitated, some whispering among themselves. Phones were discreetly raised, recording every tense moment. Chuck's jaw tightened slightly, but his voice remained calm. "Officer, accusing someone publicly without evidence is not only unfair, it's unlawful. You're targeting me without cause." The cop leaned in closer, lowering his voice, trying to scare Chuck. "You don't get to lecture me. Step aside, or I'll place you under arrest." At that moment, the tension in the air became almost unbearable. Pedestrians slowed their pace, unsure whether to intervene. A mother clutched her child's hand tightly. Some onlookers whispered among themselves, sensing that the officer was escalating unnecessarily. One bystander, a young man with a phone, murmured to his friend, "This doesn't look right. That guy is calm, and the cop is over the top." Chuck noticed the recording. Without reacting, he gave a small nod of acknowledgement to the phone camera, silently assuring the bystander that everything would be handled peacefully. The officer, still blinded by his own ego and prejudice, continued his accusations. "Step aside while I investigate further. You might be involved in ongoing thefts around this area. Don't play games with me." Chuck's calm tone cut through the tension. "I am not playing games. I am a citizen with rights. You cannot harass someone based on appearance alone. I demand that you treat me with the same respect you would anyone else." The cop's face reddened, frustration boiling. He scribbled notes, muttered to himself, and tried to maintain authority, but the crowd's subtle murmurs started to shift against him. A few bystanders whispered, "Why is he being treated like this?" If you're watching this, comment below which country or city you're in. Have you ever seen someone falsely accused in public like this? The officer, realizing that bystanders were now recording and noticing his behavior, attempted to regain control. "You think people will side with you? You think your calm words can protect you? Chuck's gaze never wavered. It's not words that protect a man, officer. It's actions and integrity. The tension mounted as the officer tried to fabricate a connection between Chuck and a series of petty thefts in the neighborhood. He began writing false statements, muttering about witnesses who saw someone like you. Chuck, still silent, observed the crowd. He noticed the growing unease. People were exchanging glances, questioning the cop's behavior. Their phones captured every word, every gesture, every attempt at intimidation. Chuck finally spoke again, his voice firm, calm, and commanding. Officer, you are violating my rights. You have no evidence against me. Your actions are being recorded by everyone around. Do what you must, but I will not allow injustice to be done in silence. The officer, blinded by his bias and anger, ignored the warning, thinking intimidation would force Chuck into submission. But Chuck's calm defiance had a magnetic effect on the crowd. Whispers of admiration spread, and the officer realized, too late, that the public was no longer on his side. Chuck's patience, discipline, and dignity were slowly shifting the balance. While the officer tried to frame him, Chuck's presence radiated quiet power, an unspoken warning that anyone who underestimated him would regret it. By the end of the confrontation, a small crowd had gathered. Phones recorded the entire exchange. People whispered, "Who is this man? He's handling that cop like a pro." Little did they know, the man being falsely accused was none other than Chuck Norris, and the officer was about to learn a lesson he would never forget. The cop's frustration was now visible in every line of his face. Sweat beaded along his forehead, and his hands trembled slightly as he waved his notebook. "I said step aside," he barked, his voice echoing through the small gathering crowd. "I will not tolerate disrespect, and you will answer for your actions." Chuck Norris, standing calmly, did not move. His posture was relaxed but commanding, his eyes locked onto the officers with unflinching intensity. He remained completely composed, letting the officer's anger speak louder than words. "Officer," Chuck said slowly, "I have done nothing wrong. Your threats do not intimidate me." The officer's anger seemed to spike further. "You think you're untouchable? You think your calm demeanor protects you?" he shouted, pointing aggressively. "I will arrest you if you don't comply immediately." Chuck's wife, standing nearby, clutched their young daughter's hand tightly. "Honey, please, just let it go," she whispered. Fear and concern etched on her face. Chuck shook his head ever so slightly. "No," he replied quietly. "We've done nothing wrong, and I will not let injustice happen in front of my family." The officer's threats grew more extreme. He reached for his radio as if calling for backup, his voice rising with every word. "You are under suspicion for theft and disturbing public order. Step aside now, or I will handcuff you." A murmur spread through the bystanders. Phones were now recording every second, and onlookers began whispering, "Why is he being treated like this? That man hasn't done anything." Some people started to edge closer, curious and concerned, while others remained cautiously distant. Chuck's calmness contrasted sharply with the officer's escalating aggression. He took a small step forward, not to intimidate, but to assert presence. His voice was low, measured, and carried an undeniable authority. "You cannot scare people with false accusations. What you are doing is wrong, and it will be remembered." The officer's jaw tightened. "Do you think you can lecture me while I'm performing my duty?" he snapped, his tone almost hysterical. "I decide what is right here." Chuck didn't respond with anger. Instead, he allowed a brief silence to settle over the gathering crowd, letting everyone see the stark difference between calm dignity and uncontrolled rage. The onlookers leaned in, captivated. Children clutched parents' hands, and even some adults held their breath. A bystander whispered to their friend, "He's incredible. Just look at him. No one handles someone like that so calmly." Another voice muttered, "If that were me, I'd have lost my temper a long time ago." If you were in Chuck's shoes right now, what would you do? Comment your answer below. The officer, realizing that his authority was slipping in front of the public, attempted to reassert control. "I can have you arrested on the spot for resisting a lawful order. You think your fame or calmness will save you?" Chuck's eyes narrowed slightly, but his voice remained steady. "I do not need fame to know right from wrong. You cannot force justice with threats. Respect is earned, not demanded through fear." The tension reached a breaking point. The officer's movements became erratic. He waved his hands, yelled, and gestured aggressively, but the crowd's attention was now fully on him. Phones captured every second of his overreaction. Chuck's presence radiated control. Even without striking a single blow, he dominated the space, forcing the officer into the corner of his own frustration. The people around began whispering, "Who is this man? How can someone be so calm in the face of such hostility?" Despite the rising pressure, Chuck's gaze remained steady. He was like a quiet storm, patient and contained, letting the officer's anger build until it became unsustainable. The officer's inability to provoke Chuck further humiliated him in front of the crowd, a fact he had yet to realize. By the end of this confrontation, the scene had transformed. What began as a simple harassment attempt had turned into a public display of injustice versus integrity. Chuck stood tall, composed, and unshakable, while the officer's face grew redder, his authority undermined by both his own bias and the witness of the gathering crowd. Little did anyone know, this rising tension was only setting the stage for Chuck's next move, the moment when the tables would turn and the officer would face the consequences of his own actions. The crowd had grown noticeably larger, drawn by the commotion. People were recording the confrontation on their phones, whispering to one another, and inching closer, curious and anxious. Chuck Norris remained calm in the center of it all, his posture relaxed yet undeniably commanding. The officer, oblivious to the gathering attention, continued barking orders, trying to assert dominance that was rapidly slipping from his grasp. Among the crowd, a young man nudged his friend, pointing discreetly. "Wait, that looks like Chuck Norris, the martial arts legend, the senator, the man who's fought in so many arenas." His friend's eyes widened. "No way, that can't be him. Are you serious?" The young man nodded. "I'm serious. Look at him. That calmness, that's him. I've seen him in interviews. He's exactly like this." Whispers began spreading through the crowd like wildfire. "That's Chuck Norris. The champion? The senator? The man who can take down anyone." Some bystanders gasped audibly, while others quietly exclaimed their admiration. A few who were skeptical paused their recording to get a closer look, confirming what their ears had just caught. The tension in the air shifted slightly. The officer's aggressive words now seemed smaller, almost petty, compared to the presence of the man he was harassing. The officer, still focused on asserting control, did not yet recognize who he was dealing with. He waved his notebook in Chuck's face. "You think your calm words will save you? Step aside or face arrest." Chuck, hearing the officer but now noticing the growing murmurs around him, kept his composure. His gaze briefly swept the crowd. He could feel their eyes on him, some awe-filled, others curious, and a few skeptical. Yet he said nothing, letting the whispers and energy of the crowd work subtly in his favor. A middle-aged woman in the front whispered to her friend, "That man standing there. It's Chuck Norris. He's done more than anyone here could imagine. He's literally unstoppable." The young man who had first spotted him raised his phone, showing the screen to a nearby onlooker. "See? That's him." The officer, growing more frustrated with the murmurs and the attention, shouted, "Everyone, stay back. This is none of your business." But the more he tried to reassert control, the more apparent it became that he was losing it. The crowd now watched not just the confrontation, but the unfolding humiliation of a man who had grossly underestimated the one standing before him. The whispers grew louder. "He's Chuck Norris. He's unstoppable. He doesn't even need to fight to command respect." Chuck's calm presence now had a visible effect on the officer. The cop's face reddened, his voice trembling slightly despite his attempts to appear authoritative. Every gesture, every word of aggression, now seemed ineffective. The officer was trying to intimidate a man whose reputation alone carried more weight than any badge could. Chuck's wife, still holding their daughter's hand, glanced at him with concern but also with admiration. Chuck gave her a reassuring nod, signaling that he was aware of the crowd and the rising tension, but he did not intend to exploit his fame just yet. He wanted the officer to realize, through his own actions and the witness of the public, the mistake he had made. Some bystanders started speaking directly to the officer, questioning his actions. "Sir, is this really necessary?" one man asked. "He hasn't done anything wrong." The officer snapped, trying to regain control. "I said step aside. You don't understand the law." Chuck finally broke his silence, his voice calm, measured, and firm. Officer, respect is not commanded through fear or lies. Treating someone unjustly in public does not prove your authority. It proves your weakness. The crowd gasped at the words, impressed by his composure and courage. Even those who hadn't recognized him yet felt the undeniable weight of his presence. The whispers grew again. Who is this man? He's not just a martial artist. He commands respect through integrity alone. The officer, frustrated and flustered, tried to refocus on the task at hand, but the crowd's attention had shifted completely. Chuck Norris had become the center of their eyes, their recordings, and their admiration. The realization of his true identity was spreading like wildfire. The scene set the stage perfectly. The officer, blinded by arrogance, still did not grasp who he was confronting, while Chuck's calm and commanding presence had already begun to humiliate him without a single strike. The tension between the cop's anger and Chuck's quiet power was at an all-time high. Have you ever witnessed someone completely outclass another person without lifting a finger? Comment below if you think Chuck should finally reveal himself. The murmurs in the crowd had grown louder. The realization that this was Chuck Norris, the legendary martial artist, war hero, and man of integrity, was spreading like wildfire. Bystanders whispered, some even gasped audibly. It's him, the man who never loses. The officer, still blind to the whispers, stomped his foot and shouted, Enough! Step aside, or I swear I'll arrest you on the spot. Chuck remained completely calm, his eyes fixed on the officer. His voice, quiet yet commanding, cut through the chaos like steel. Officer, he began, you've been accusing me without cause. You've attempted to humiliate me publicly. Your actions are being witnessed by everyone here. Do you see how this looks? The cop's face reddened further. You think your words can intimidate me? He snapped. Chuck's lips curled into a small, almost imperceptible smile. I'm not here to intimidate. I'm here to show the truth. The truth that respect cannot be demanded through fear or false accusations. A young bystander, emboldened, stepped closer and whispered to a friend. He's not even raising his voice, but the officer looked scared. The officer, desperate to regain control, waved his notebook aggressively. You're obstructing justice. You are resisting a lawful order. Chuck took a deliberate step forward, calm yet deliberate. Every motion carried weight. Officer, look around. Everyone here is recording your every word, your every action. You are attempting to frame an innocent man. Do you truly believe your authority is served by lying and threatening? The crowd began to murmur louder, many nodding in agreement. Phones were raised higher, recording every second. Chuck's composure had shifted the dynamics completely. The aggressor now felt the pressure of public scrutiny. You don't understand, the officer shouted, waving his hands. I have to enforce the law. Chuck's voice was firm now, unwavering. The law is meant to protect, not oppress. You cannot justify harassment and prejudice under its name. The officer stumbled back slightly, unaccustomed to such direct confrontation. He tried to shout again, but the words seemed hollow in the presence of Chuck's calm authority. Every witness was now aware that this was a man who demanded respect through integrity, not force. Chuck reached into his jacket, pulling out a small notebook of his own, not to challenge the officer, but to document the incident. He turned to the crowd and calmly stated, Everything you see here is being documented. This is not a display of power. This is a display of truth. No one should ever be judged or accused unfairly. Bystanders gasped audibly. He's exposing the cop, one whispered. Others nodded, murmuring agreement and admiration. The officer, realizing that his attempt to frame Chuck was failing publicly, began sweating profusely. His voice faltered. I don't. Chuck took another step forward, his presence now radiating undeniable authority. You can continue to hide behind your badge, but everyone here sees what you truly are. Misjudgment, prejudice, and abuse of power will not stand in the light of truth. For the first time, the officer hesitated. His notebook lowered slightly. His aggressive gestures slowed. The crowd sensed the shift. Chuck had not struck a single blow, yet he had completely turned the situation around. A bystander, clearly impressed, whispered to the person next to him. He doesn't even need to fight. Look at him. That calmness, that control, it's like he's untouchable. Chuck's eyes scanned the crowd one last time before focusing back on the officer. You've been given a chance to correct your actions. Do so. Otherwise, the consequences of your misconduct will reach far beyond this street. The cop's shoulders slumped slightly. The officer had realized, finally, that he had underestimated the wrong man. Chuck's moral authority, calm intelligence, and the support of the crowd had completely neutralized the aggression. The whispers among the bystanders had become admiration, awe, and even relief. They had witnessed a masterclass in restraint, courage, and integrity. Chuck had turned a dangerous situation into a public lesson, without a single strike thrown. Have you ever seen someone completely outclass another person without lifting a finger? Comment below what you think Chuck should do next. Chuck's next move would be the moment the cop would finally face humiliation, a moment that would satisfy the crowd, teach a lesson, and set the stage for the viral aftermath. But for now, the officer was frozen, unable to react, while Chuck's calm but undeniable dominance had taken full control of the scene. The officer's confidence had completely eroded. His chest heaved, and his face glowed red, not with authority, but with frustration and embarrassment. Every gesture, every word now seemed futile in the face of Chuck Norris's calm dominance. The crowd could sense the shift in power, and whispers of anticipation rippled through the onlookers. Chuck remained calm, but there was a subtle change in his demeanor, a quiet signal that the lesson was about to be delivered. Without raising his voice, he addressed the crowd. Everyone here has seen what happened. What began as a false accusation has now become a public display of prejudice and abuse of power. Some bystanders nodded, murmuring their agreement. Finally, one whispered, "He's going to put the cop in his place." The officer, still trembling slightly, attempted to regain control. I was just following procedure," he stammered, waving his notebook weakly. Chuck's voice cut through the chaos, calm but commanding. "Procedure does not justify injustice. You have harassed an innocent man in public, and that will not be ignored." At that moment, a fellow officer arrived on the scene, alerted by the commotion. He glanced at Chuck, recognition dawning in his eyes. "Wait, this is Chuck Norris," he said quietly to the first officer. The words hung in the air. The first officer froze, realizing the magnitude of his mistake. Whispers from the crowd erupted. "That's Chuck Norris, the legend himself. No wonder he handled that so calmly." Chuck took a deliberate step forward, his calm gaze fixed on the embarrassed officer. "You see, respect is earned, not demanded through fear or false accusations. And when you attempt to harm an innocent person, the consequences follow." The officer stumbled backward slightly, his aggressive stance crumbling. Chuck did not strike him physically. He didn't need to. The humiliation was already complete. Every phone recording the encounter ensured that this moment would be seen by thousands, if not millions, online. Chuck's next words were sharp, measured, and public. "Your actions today will be reported. You will face the consequences of your prejudice and abuse. And let this be a lesson. No one, regardless of appearance or background, should ever be judged unjustly." The crowd erupted in applause. Some cheered, others whistled. Phones recorded every word, every gesture, every subtle display of moral and verbal dominance. The officer's authority had evaporated in front of the public eye. He was no longer in control. Chuck was. Even the arriving officer looked impressed. He handled that without violence, just pure calm and integrity, he muttered. Chuck turned to the crowd, raising a hand slightly. "Use what you've witnessed today to remember that dignity, respect, and courage matter more than anger, bias, or intimidation." The first officer's face was now pale. He mumbled something unintelligible and lowered his head, knowing he had been publicly humiliated. Every bystander's gaze reminded him of his mistake. Chuck had delivered his revenge, not through fists, but through intelligence, patience, and moral authority. The crowd's excitement continued to build. People began recording messages for social media, describing what they had just witnessed. "You won't believe what this man did." The cop thought he could intimidate him, but Chuck handled it perfectly. If you were watching this live, what would your reaction be? Type your thoughts in the comments. Chuck's wife and daughter finally stepped closer, relieved. Chuck smiled subtly, a quiet acknowledgement of the lesson that had been delivered. He had turned a potentially dangerous encounter into a masterclass of patience, composure, and moral strength. The officer, now fully humbled, stepped aside. Chuck's calm stance radiated authority, and the crowd's energy shifted from fear to admiration. Every phone, every whisper, every camera captured the moment the unjust were humbled and justice prevailed without violence. As the first officer walked away, humiliated and defeated, Chuck gave one final statement to the crowd. Let this remind us all, power does not come from fear, and authority does not come from prejudice. Stand up for what is right, remain calm in adversity, and respect one another. By the time Chuck and his family left the scene, the crowd had erupted into applause. The officer's humiliation would spread online, becoming a viral moment that reinforced Chuck Norris's legendary status, not just as a fighter, but as a man of integrity, justice, and unwavering calm. The stage was now perfectly set for the final act, the viral aftermath and worldwide recognition of Chuck's composure, which would inspire millions. By the time Chuck Norris and his family walked away from the scene, the once tense street had transformed into a buzzing hub of admiration and chatter. Phones were everywhere, recording every detail of the encounter, and people were already sharing videos across social media platforms. Clips circulated within minutes. One bystander had uploaded a clear recording showing the officer's escalating aggression and Chuck's calm, commanding response. Within hours, the video had gone viral. Millions of views streamed in from across the globe. Comments poured in, with viewers expressing shock at the officer's behavior, awe at Chuck's composure, and admiration for his moral authority. "This is incredible," one comment read. "I can't believe he handled that without violence." True legend. News outlets picked up the story. Headlines across major websites read, "Chuck Norris turns the tables on racist cop. A lesson in calm and justice. Legendary martial artist humiliates officer who tried to frame him." Viral moment. Chuck Norris handles harassment with poise and integrity. Meanwhile, the officer who had tried to frame Chuck faced serious consequences. His superiors launched an investigation into his conduct, reviewing the footage from the crowd. Complaints from witnesses corroborated Chuck's account, and the evidence clearly showed abuse of power, racial profiling, and misconduct. Within days, the officer was placed on administrative leave pending disciplinary action, while Chuck's reputation soared even higher. Across social media, fans praised Chuck not only for his legendary skills, but for his restraint and wisdom. Memes and reactions highlighted his calm dominance, his moral courage, and the way he had delivered justice without throwing a single punch. Influencers and commentators shared the story as a prime example of integrity, patience, and standing up to injustice. Even international audiences chimed in, marveling at the encounter. People from all over, different countries, cities, and cultures, shared the clip, spreading the story worldwide. The comment sections were filled with admiration and support. This is how justice should look. No one disrespects Chuck Norris. We need more people like him in the world. Chuck, ever humble, took no joy in the officer's humiliation. Instead, he used the moment to send a broader message about dignity, equality, and respect. In interviews following the incident, he stated calmly, "This wasn't about showing strength. It was about standing for what is right. No one should be judged or harassed because of how they look or who they are. Respect each other. It's the simplest way to avoid injustice." The moral resonance of the incident inspired countless viewers. People discussed it online, shared their own stories of standing up to unfair treatment, and praised Chuck for demonstrating how courage paired with composure can overcome abuse of power. For Chuck, the encounter was yet another reminder of why restraint and integrity matter more than raw force. The officer had been humiliated, justice had prevailed, and the world had witnessed the power of dignity, patience, and courage. If you believe no one should be judged or harassed unfairly, type respect in the comments. Share this story with your friends, and subscribe for more inspiring moments where courage and integrity triumph. By the evening, the hashtags #ChuckNorris, #respect, #justice, #viralhero, and #StandUpForWhat'sRight were trending globally. The incident was remembered not for conflict, but for how a true hero, calm, patient, and wise, turned the tables on injustice while inspiring millions. As Chuck Norris sat with his family later that night, he smiled quietly. Justice had been served. Integrity had triumphed. And the world, for just a moment, had witnessed what it truly means to command respect, not through fear, not through force, but through unwavering courage, calmness, and morality.